I was born on a rainy afternoon in March of 1998, in a small town tucked away in the northern part of Colombia. The air that day smelled of wet earth and car exhaust, a familiar mix that now brings back memories I never asked to keep. My mother, Camila, was barely 22 and already hardened by life. She had no one holding her hand when I came into the world, not her family, who thought she was foolish for falling in love too easily. Not the man who got her pregnant and vanished like a ghost, just her and me. From the very beginning, I was a reminder of shame, betrayal, abandonment, but not for her. For him, Andres. That was his name, my biological father. A name I didn't learn until much later, and even when I did, it carried no warmth, only a chill, like touching metal in the winter. I remember overhearing her once, on the phone, when I was maybe 6 or 7. Her voice was sharp, tired, whispering through gritted teeth. He said it's not his, that I was with someone else. His mother said I was casting spells, that I was trying to trap him. And then the tears, quiet at first, then full-bodied sobs that filled our one-bedroom apartment. I watched her from the hallway, the cheap tile cold beneath my feet. I wanted to hug her, but I stood still. I knew I couldn't fix it. My mom worked long hours as a cashier at a supermarket and cleaned houses on weekends. She never said it out loud, but I could tell she resented that she had to work so hard alone. I don't blame her. I was the child of a man who not only denied me but turned his whole family against her. They mocked her, spread rumors, whispered cruel things when they thought she wasn't listening. Or maybe they didn't care if she was. There were even stories that they had gone to a bruja, some local witch, to keep me from being born. That part used to terrify me when I was little. I would lie awake at night, imagining dark rooms, and candles and voices chanting to erase me from the world. The weight of not being wanted is something you carry differently than other burdens. It doesn't scream, it whispers, it lingers, it infects your reflection. I would look at myself in the mirror and wonder which part of me looked like him. Was it my hair, my nose, my eyes? Did he ever wonder if I looked like him too? Despite everything, my mother never allowed me to become bitter. She raised me with pride, taught me to be kind even when the world wasn't. I had food, a bed, school supplies and shoes that sometimes had to last longer than they should. She made it work. She always made it work. But the emotional toll was evident. There were days when she didn't get out of bed, days when she snapped over something small, days when I could see her swallowing her sadness like a bitter pill just to get through the afternoon. Growing up, the shadow of my father's rejection shaped everything. At school during Father's Day projects, I would lie and say he lived far away. I used to draw a random man's face and pretend I had spoken to him on the phone. I remember one year, I cried because I couldn't think of a fake gift to say I bought for him. I hated lying, but the truth felt too sharp to tell. By the time I was a teenager, I had made a silent promise to myself. I would not be like them. I wouldn't be small-minded, cruel, or indifferent. I wouldn't let bitterness become my legacy. I would leave, not just the town, not just the country. I would leave the version of me that was shaped by their rejection. I would build a life so far from their reach that their absence would no longer hurt, only echo. And so I studied like my life depended on it. In many ways, it did. I spent every free moment buried in textbooks, watching YouTube videos to learn English fluently, picking up odd jobs to help my mom, while saving every cent I could. I applied to dozens of universities abroad. I remember getting the acceptance letter to a university in Canada. It was a gray Thursday, and I felt like I had won something enormous. Like I had broken a generational curse. Mom cried when I told her. She hugged me so tightly that I could barely breathe, but I let her. For once it wasn't from sadness. When I landed in Toronto in the fall of 2016, everything felt surreal. The air was cold, crisp, and nothing like the humid heat I grew up in. I was alone, but not in the same way I had been back home. This loneliness felt full of possibility, like I had finally stepped into the story I was meant to write. Over the next few years, I flourished. I worked harder than anyone around me. I graduated with honors in 2020, even during the chaos of the pandemic. I landed a job in marketing at a major tech firm. I met Alex, the man who would become my husband. He was kind, curious, emotionally present, the polar opposite of my father. We traveled together, explored the world, built a home filled with laughter and little routine. I created the life I had dreamed of as a girl lying awake in a hot apartment, listening to my mother cry. I had made it. But then, they came back. First, it was a comment from a cousin I didn't know I had, then a message from someone claiming to be my aunt, and then a wave. No, a flood of sudden recognition. It was like I had suddenly been found by people who had spent decades pretending I didn't exist. And not because they missed me, but because they could now use me. It started subtly, quiet waves before the tsunami. In the summer of 2023, I went back to Colombia, for the first time in nearly 5 years. It was supposed to be a short trip, 10 days to visit my mom, eat her food, sit on our old rooftop with a cup of café con leche, and talk about nothing. A reset, that's what I called it. A small breather from the cold glass towers and endless Zoom calls back in Toronto. I should have known better. My mom had aged, not drastically, but enough that it stung. There were more lines around her eyes, and she moved a little slower. She smiled just the same though. Like everything she'd endured, hadn't managed to break her spirit. We cooked arepas together, sat in our pajamas watching telenovelas, laughed about old neighbors, and annoying relatives. On the third day, we went to the local market early in the morning. I always loved those streets. Vibrant, loud, chaotic in a comforting way. We were walking past a small bakery, when I saw an older woman sweeping her storefront. She looked up, our eyes met. I smiled politely, nodded, and muttered, "Buenos dias." That was it. Just a greet. A small act of politeness I extended to hundreds of strangers every day. But 2 days later, my mom came back from the hair salon with this look. Part uncomfortable, part amused. She told me that my abuelita, my father's mother, had been there too, and she was apparently so happy that her granddaughter wasn't mad at her anymore. She said, "You look just like her side of the family," my mom said with a strange smirk. Said it was only natural you'd grow up beautiful with their blood. I blinked, laughed at first. It was absurd. This woman, who had once accused my mother of using dark spirits to trap her son, now felt ownership over my face. I didn't say anything right away, but that night I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling fans spinning slowly, thinking of all the years my mom and I spent scraping together rent, the nights she skipped dinner so I could eat, the way she used to cry in the shower because she thought I couldn't hear her. And now this woman, who had watched my mom walk through town pregnant and alone, who had spread rumors about curses and illegitimacy, now she was proud to call me her granddaughter. For a single good morning, I didn't reach out. I didn't answer the message my cousin sent a few days later. It was simple at first. A "Hey, I saw you're in town." I ignored it. Then came the next one. "We should meet up, fam is everything." And then the next. "Also, do you think you could help me out? I'm in a bit of a tough spot. Family should support each other." She asked for the equivalent of $3,000. No context, no explanation, just an assumption that now that I had made it, I'd want to share with them, the very people who made sure I grew up feeling like an unwanted mistake. I was furious, not just at her, at all of them. At the audacity, the entitlement, the sheer shameless gall to claim me now that I had value. Because that's what it was, wasn't it? I had finally become valuable. Not when I was a baby they tried to erase. Not when I was a teenager trying to buy second-hand books to learn English. Not when I worked night shifts at a restaurant, just to afford my first year of tuition. No. I became family the moment I had something they could take. That realization broke something in me. I had spent my entire life trying to be better. Not just in success, but in I wanted to be someone who didn't carry hate. I wanted to be kind, generous, forgiving. But now I saw it clearly. Forgiveness wasn't some moral badge you earned by swallowing your pain. It wasn't a requirement. They had not apologized. They had not reached out in humility. They didn't even acknowledge the years of silence, rejection, cruelty. They just showed up at the gates of my life, hands out, faces smiling, acting like they'd always been there. And in a way, that hurt more than the original abandonment. Because I was no longer the powerless child in this story. I was the adult. I had the agency. I had the choice to shut the door. But with that power came the storm, the guilt, the what-ifs. I started replaying moments I thought I had buried. Like the time I asked my mom if my father ever wanted to meet me, And she looked at me like I had asked if the sky could turn green. Or the time I found a photo of him online, taken at some community event, smiling with his arm around his real family, his acknowledged children. They looked nothing like me, and everything like a life I would never have. I thought I had outgrown the need to be claimed, but when my cousin asked for money with the words "family helps each other," I cracked. I opened my phone and typed back, "You're not my family." I didn't send it, but I wanted to. I thought about all the children like me, those born into silence, made invisible by the people meant to protect them, and how many of us go on to build lives filled with light, only to have our shadows try to follow us. That trip ended with me declining every invitation, ignoring every message, blocking a few numbers. My mom understood. She didn't pressure me to make peace or play nice. She just sat beside me on the couch and held my hand while we watched the rain. For the first time in years, I cried in front of her. All those decades of pretending it didn't matter. It did. It still does. When I got back to Toronto, everything looked the same, but felt off. You know that strange hollowness that follows you after an emotional earthquake? That was me. I walked through my routines like a ghost, brushed my teeth, answered emails, laughed at work jokes, but something inside had shifted, like a string had been plucked too hard and snapped. And now there was this quiet, constant buzz in its place. Alex noticed right away. He's always been emotionally intuitive. One of the things I love most about him, he didn't press, he just cooked more, hugged me longer, left little sticky notes on my laptop that said things like "You're strong even when you're tired," and "Proud of you forever." But I couldn't bring myself to say what was going on. Not yet. It was like explaining it would make it real again. Instead, I threw myself into work. I stayed late, picked up side projects, spoke at a few online conferences, posted polished photos from old vacations, smiling with a wine glass in my hand, the Eiffel Tower or Santorini in the background. It was easier to play the part of the successful daughter of no one than to admit I was unraveling. But the truth is, their sudden reappearance reopened a wound I thought had scarred over. I thought I had made peace with the rejection, buried it under layers of accomplishments, friends, stamps in my passport. But underneath all that glitter, it was still the little girl in me was still waiting, still hoping that someone would finally say, "I'm sorry." It's funny how even the most independent, accomplished adult can still carry the fragile, aching heart of a child. That version of me, the one who watched classmates run to their dads at the end of school, who lied during parent day and said her dad was just busy, who practiced smiling when people asked if I looked more like my mom or my dad. She was still inside me. She never left. And now, she was screaming. I started having dreams, vivid ones. In one, I was at a huge banquet table, filled with people I didn't know but who all had my last name. My father sat at the head, surrounded by his family. I stood in the doorway, holding a gift, just a small box, wrapped in blue paper. No one noticed me. I kept calling out, trying to get someone to look at me, but my voice made no sound. Eventually, I put the box down on a chair and left. No one followed. I woke up crying. In real life, I didn't want their acknowledgement anymore, but my subconscious had other plans. I started talking to a therapist, something I'd put off for years. Her name was Jenna, soft-spoken, probably in her mid-40s, the kind of person who could sit in total silence with you and still make you feel heard. I told her everything, from the denial to the rumors about witchcraft, to the sudden flood of DMs and fake affection now that I had something they wanted. She asked me a simple question during our third session that shook me. Do you think they see you, or do they only see your success? That question haunted me. Because the answer was obvious. They saw the money, the career, the passport stamps, the shiny version of me that they could use as a trophy. Not the girl who stayed up nights wondering if she was cursed. Not the young woman who had to learn how to hold both pride and pain in the same heart. Not me. Just what I had become. Even worse, I realized I was starting to second-guess myself. I'd find myself wondering, what if they really did change? What if they're just trying to connect now and I'm being cold? What if I'm the one carrying the bitterness? And then I'd snap out of it. Remember the silence, the cruelty, the rumors, the witchcraft, and the worst one of all, the sheer indifference. They didn't just ignore me, they chose to erase me, until I became impossible to ignore. But now that I had money, they called me family. Now that I had a house, they wanted to visit. Now that I had a name people respected, they wanted to borrow it. It's a strange grief, mourning a relationship that never existed. I wasn't mourning the loss of a father. I never had one. I was mourning the fantasy I built around the idea of what a father could have been, what a family could have been. And that grief doesn't come all at once. It trickles in, a memory here, a realization there, until it becomes a flood. I talked to my mom more often. She was my anchor in all of this. When I told her everything that had happened, every message, every strange conversation, every person pretending we had some shared past, they never asked how I was, just acted like we were picking up from a paused episode. She didn't get angry. She just said I knew this day would come. Then she added, "You owe them nothing." And that's what I held on to, because she was right. I owed them nothing. Not my forgiveness, not my kindness, not my success, not my time, not my silence, not even an explanation. But even knowing that didn't make it easier. I still carried the weight. It showed up in unexpected ways, in how I hesitated before posting a photo of my wedding ring, worried someone might say we're so proud of her, like they had anything to do with it, in how I froze when my company offered to feature me in a Women Who Inspire campaign, unsure if it would open the door to more messages, more "hey cousin," texts from strangers who once gossiped about my mother's pregnancy like it was a scandal. Even joy felt tainted. That's the thing no one tells you. When the people who hurt you the most try to come back after you've healed, it doesn't just reopen wounds. It makes you question whether healing was even real, or just temporary peace. But I wasn't going to break. Not again.
I remember the exact moment I stopped feeling guilty. It was a Tuesday in November, a few months after I returned from Colombia. The air in Toronto had begun to shift. Cold winds crept between buildings, leaves curled into crisp little bones, and people walked faster, heads tucked into scarves. I was heading home from work, earbuds in, listening to an old podcast I'd already heard a dozen times, just for the comfort of something predictable. And then my phone buzzed, another message request on Instagram. A different cousin this time, one I'd never met. Her profile picture was a filtered selfie, all sparkle and smudged eyeliner. The message was short, casual, like we were old friends. "Hey Prima. So cool to see you on the news. Our fam's so proud of you." Just days before, I'd been interviewed by a local outlet about a project I was leading, a mentorship initiative for Latino women in tech. It wasn't national news, just a feel-good community piece. But apparently that had been enough. My name was searchable, my face was out there. And with that visibility came the vultures. I stared at the message, read it again, and then I deleted it. No reply, no second thought. That was the moment. Something inside me clicked. A cold, clear click like a lock sliding shut. I wasn't going to carry this anymore. I wasn't going to keep shrinking myself, or second-guessing my own story, or wondering if I was being too harsh just because I refused to let users rebrand themselves as family. I started therapy for a reason. I was peeling back decades of silence, shame, and surviving. I wasn't going to let guilt win now. So I drew a line. First, I made all my social media private. Scrubbed the profiles, changed bios, removed tags from old photos. If they wanted to find me, they'd have to work for it. Then I went through my inbox. Every cousin, aunt, second uncle, random friend of a relative. Every message pretending we had history. I deleted them all. No explanations. No justifications. Gone. I wasn't angry anymore. I was clear. And clarity is a weapon. One night I sat down with Alex, and finally let everything spill. Every ugly detail I'd kept inside for years. The things they said about my mom. The stories about the bruja. The way I used to pretend I had a father so I wouldn't look different from the other kid. I told him about the dreams, the doubt, the guilt. He didn't interrupt, just held my hand as I talked. When I was done, he said something that stayed with me. "You built yourself from nothing. They don't get to rewrite that." That line echoed for days. I built myself, brick by brick. Late nights and early mornings, part-time jobs and cold bus stops, visa rejections and scholarship essays, and phone calls home where my mom would whisper, "You can do this, Misha," even when she had nothing left to give. I built this life. They didn't. So I decided to own it. I stopped hiding. I accepted the community award in person. Stood on that stage and spoke about growing up fatherless, about being the daughter of a woman who was mocked and shamed but never quit. I said my mom was my hero. I said we don't get to choose where we come from, but we do get to choose who we become. Afterward, I got a standing ovation, not because I was flawless, but because I was honest. and honest people carry light. In the weeks that followed, I started to feel lighter. Not all at once. Grief and trauma don't disappear like that. But it was like I'd stopped dragging a suitcase behind me and finally unpacked it instead, looked at what was inside, kept the things that mattered, burned the rest. I started writing again, just for myself. Journals full of memories, some painful, some absurd, some so tender they made me cry. I wrote about my mom's laugh when she got tipsy, about the way our fridge used to hum at night when we didn't have AC, about the time I wore a hand-sewn dress to my graduation because we couldn't afford store-bought. Every word felt like reclamation. A few weeks later I got an unexpected email from an old friend back in Colombia. She said she had heard rumors that my dad's family was proud of me, that they'd started including me in stories about the next generation, as if I'd always been one of them. I laughed out loud. And then I felt something I didn't expect. Peace. Because I finally understood something fundamental. Their recognition didn't matter. It never did. Recognition without accountability is just manipulation in nicer clothes. They could tell the world I was theirs. They could whisper that I looked like them, or that I had their blood. They could tell themselves whatever helped them sleep. But I knew the truth. I was not. I never was. I was my mother's daughter. And I belonged to myself. It was a quiet morning in early spring 2024 when I finally felt like I could breathe without the weight of the past pressing down on my chest. The sun was just beginning to peek through the curtains, casting warm golden stripes across our bedroom. Alex was still asleep beside me, his breathing steady and calm. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Not the kind of forced peace that comes from pretending everything is okay, but the real kind. The kind that grows slowly, like a seed breaking through hard soil. I thought about my mom and how she must have felt all those years, carrying me alone through whispers, insults and silence. About the sacrifices she made, the nights she cried herself to sleep, the courage it took just to show up for me every day. I thought about my own journey, the miles I crossed, the battles I fought, the life I built from the rubble of rejection. And I understood that my story was more than just the pain. It was about survival, about triumph, about writing your own narrative, when everyone else tries to erase you. A few weeks later I took a flight back to Colombia. This time, not as a visitor haunted by old ghosts, but as someone who had made peace with them. I wanted to see my mom, to sit on that old rooftop again, to hear her laugh without any shadows lurking in the corners. When I arrived I found her in the kitchen, humming softly as she cooked. I hugged her tightly, feeling the years between us soften. We didn't need many words, just presence. As for my father's family, I didn't reach out. I didn't send a message or accept an invitation. Their recognition was hollow, and I knew it. But life has a way of moving forward anyway. One evening while walking through the neighborhood market, an elderly woman smiled at me and said, "You have your mother's strength." I smiled back, genuinely this time, because I knew where I came from, and more importantly, who I chose to. My father's family may have tried to erase me with words and silence, but they never could take away my story, my dignity or the love that built me. I am not the product of their denial. I am the product of my mother's unwavering love, and my own fierce will to rise. And that is a family worth belonging to.